I was going through a challenging time and felt quite unmotivated about life when one day I had an experience that changed everything. Suddenly, I found myself in front of two impressive figures, and with my heart racing, I decided to approach them. One introduced himself as Jesus and the other as Metatron. "Hello, Carmel. It's good to see you again," they said with warm smiles. This greeting touched me deeply, and I couldn't hold back my tears. I began to cry as a wave of pain surged from my chest. I poured out my feelings of sadness and hurt, as if life had been excessively harsh and unfair to me. They listened to me patiently, allowing me to express everything I had been holding inside. Then, with a serenity that calmed me, they explained that I didn't need to return to Earth and that I could choose to remain dead if I wished. It was a surprising revelation. I realized I had a choice and that my suffering could end right there, so I felt an inexplicable peace, as if all my worries and pains had been lifted. Now, let's get to know the story of Carmel Bell. She reports that she died and conversed with an angel, which completely transformed her life. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and hit the notification bell to be alerted about new videos. Now, let's hear Carmel's testimony. My name is Carmel, and for many years I worked as a doctor in Australia. 15 years ago, I had a near-death experience in which I actually died and remained dead for about an hour. I was revived by the ambulance team after 47 minutes of tireless efforts. During that time, I found myself in a totally different place, interacting with various people. On February 14th, 2009, I attended a wedding where my cousin was marrying her fiancé. I had a great time at that event, and while driving home with my husband, we were preparing to rest as it was quite late. As I lay down, I felt a strangeness. Although there were no physical signs, it was more of a spiritual and emotional sensation. As soon as I lay down, I fell asleep quickly, which made me happy, as I often struggled to sleep. Suddenly, I realized I was awake, though my eyes were still closed, feeling my body sway side to side. I got up, confused, wondering why I had gotten out of bed. When I opened my eyes, I saw that I was still in my room, which remained dark except for the light from a clock. I checked the time, and it was about 3 a.m. Looking down, I noticed a body lying on my bed, in the usual position, but with its eyes partially open. Watching that body for a minute or two, I realized it was me. I was observing my own body lying there, which felt extremely unusual. This experience didn't resemble an astral projection, something I had experienced before and knew to be more confusing. This time, the vision was clear, as if I were face to face with myself. I then asked myself what I should do, questioning if I had really died, since I didn't feel that way. I decided to try to return to my body, lying down on it, as if I were just sitting on the bed, but soon found myself back beside the bed again. I repeated the attempt 1 or 2 more times, getting the same result, and I realized I couldn't reintegrate into my body. It seemed like something was blocking me. Desperate, I thought about what to do next. I wasn't ready to accept that I was dead, and my husband was still sleeping peacefully beside me. I decided to wake him, moving to his side of the bed to shake him, but it was in vain. I couldn't touch him or move him. I started shouting in the darkness, desperately calling for him to wake up and help me, saying I was dead, but he showed no reaction. I kept trying to shake him and shout for about 10 minutes before resigning myself to the idea that he simply wouldn't wake up. I accepted that maybe I really was dead. I reflected on what might happen next and wondered where those who were supposed to come for me were since I was still in that room. I began to fear becoming a wandering spirit, something I definitely didn't want. Then I saw sparks descending through the air, and through them I realized that a new space was beginning to form. I thought, oh, I don't want to go down that path. I'd rather avoid that route. I knew that it would lead me to what we call heaven, which meant I would truly be dead. Suddenly, my husband sat up in bed and I thought, oh, he's awake. He must have heard me. He got up and went to the bathroom while I murmured to myself, that's it. I'm doomed. I thought my husband was taking forever in the bathroom. During the night, I believe he takes little naps in there. Resigned, I came to the conclusion, well, this is it. I'm definitely dead. A few minutes later, he returned, jumped back into bed, kissed me on the cheek, and sitting up again asked, Carmel, what did you do when you turned on the light? He could see my sad and silent expression as I was clearly lifeless. At that moment, my husband, who was a paramedic, started performing CPR on me. Since he wasn't getting an immediate response, he jumped out of bed and dashed down the hallway to one of our children's rooms, shouting, Quick, call an ambulance, your mother is dead. I could hear him clearly. Then he returned to the room and continued with the chest compressions. Soon, I heard the siren approaching and just watched as Bernie performed CPR. Shortly after, I heard the sound of the stretcher and the paramedics' equipment coming down the hallway toward our room. They came in, moved my bed aside, pushed Bernie away, and laid me on the floor. At that moment, I thought, okay, I'm safe now. Then, I was enveloped by a light and found myself in heaven, a place that felt just right. I realized it was still dark, probably the same time as before. 2 human figures were waiting for me. One was extremely tall, over 8 feet, while the other was of average height. They stood by a kind of oasis. For those who have already read my book or my biography, you know this wasn't my first experience with death. In fact, I had died 3 times before this experience, and each time I found myself in the same place, so I wasn't surprised. I then decided to approach the figures, and one introduced himself as Jesus, while the other identified as Metatron. They greeted me saying, "Hello, Carmel, it's good to see you again." I remember I started to cry, feeling a wave of pain rising from me as I expressed how sad and hurt I was by a life that felt overwhelmingly difficult. They reassured me, allowing me to vent for a while, and then explained that I didn't have to return to Earth and could choose to stay dead if I wanted to. I reflected on my life on Earth. It was astonishing to be in a place that I knew was real, yet didn't belong to the physical world, even though it felt just as tangible. There was no rush nor pressure, and the entities, whether human or animal, were all incredibly caring and loving. They asked me to consider this and began to tell me that if I chose to go back, they would have a request to make. Curiously, I had been there for a considerable amount of time. If we were to gauge it by human standards, it was years. Since the moment the ambulance arrived and I began to be revived, 47 minutes had passed. Those were 47 minutes of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, electric shocks, and adrenaline injections. During all that time I was in heaven, or rather in that place conversing with these figures. I asked them questions that might have seemed strange, but I was searching for hope for the world and the future. For instance, I asked whether the series Star Trek, which is old and popular, was real, and they informed me that indeed, something similar could exist in the future, although differently from how it's presented. I also questioned the relevance of a religion like the church, and the answer I received was that it wasn't essential. They said that as long as you have faith in something greater than ourselves, that is already enough. The purpose of life, essentially, is to learn to be kind, to learn to love, and to be receptive. I believe many of us think we understand what it truly means to love, but in reality, it's quite a complex skill. I remember one occasion when I was with someone who was ending a relationship with his girlfriend. She asked him if he loved her, and he replied that yes, but he also loved pizza. This, for me, was a revelation about the difficulty of distinguishing our feelings for something as simple as our favorite food from the emotions we nurture for those we truly love. Love is a deeply intense emotion, and in heaven, it is vibrant and fundamentally connected to every part of your being, something very different from what we experience here. Metatron and Jesus showed immense compassion in the face of all the difficulties I had encountered up until that moment. It's important to mention that my journey hasn't been conventional. I am an intuitive healer, a profession in which I use my intuition to help heal health issues. This field is often underexplored and frequently misunderstood by most people. As I embarked on this journey, I quickly realized it was a solitary territory, with few colleagues sharing the same practice. This lack of understanding led to considerable social isolation. My encounter with Metatron and Jesus transformed my perspective. They not only acknowledged my struggles, but also granted me the freedom to choose my path, providing me with comfort and a new outlook on the purpose of life. Longtime friends began to distance themselves, even hesitating to let their children play with mine. The weight of these judgments was painful and left deep emotional scars, making that period one of the most challenging of my life. However, during my transcendental experience, I felt that upon returning to Earth and continuing my work with healing energies, people's perceptions would gradually change. Metatron and Jesus' vision for my mission was clear. There was a greater purpose to fulfill and a progressive acceptance that society needed to undergo. Since the event of my death, which happened exactly 15 years ago, I have observed a slow transformation in the acceptance of these alternative practices. The initial prejudice has given way to curiosity and, in many instances, a renewed respect for my work. This process of change has not been simple or swift. It has required not only persistence in my practice, but also a continuous effort to educate and enlighten others about the benefits and legitimacy of intuitive healing. I have always sought to maintain dignity and continue offering support to those seeking help, even in the face of the barriers posed by skepticism and distrust. At many moments, I questioned whether it was worth continuing down this lonely path. However, the encouraging words and the compassion shown by such elevated beings as Metatron and Jesus during my near-death experience reaffirmed my belief that I was on the right track. They taught me that true healing goes beyond the physical aspect and reaches the deeper layers of the human experience. My mission encompasses much more than social acceptance. It's about contributing to the well-being and spiritual growth of others. Now looking back, I realize that my journey not only shaped my character and strengthened my resilience, but also allowed me to be a pioneer in a field that has gained more recognition and respect over time. This shift in mindset wasn't just a product of time passing. It resulted from intense effort and dedication, both to my practice and to my patients. Although this phase of my journey was filled with challenges, it also served as a profound learning experience marked by significant personal and professional stories. The growing acceptance of intuitive medicine is a testament not only to my individual struggles, but also to the evolving perceptions within the field of medicine as a whole. While I remained in the sky, communicating with these entities, I was aware that my spiritual guides, Peter and Hirun, who assist me during consultations, were also present. I spent time primarily reflecting on myself and how I managed moments of anger or disappointment. Over the years, I came to understand that the true essence of life is rooted in kindness and love. Eventually, Jesus told me that if I wanted to return, I needed to do so immediately. Otherwise, it would be too late. So, I said my goodbyes and returned to my room, where I realized the paramedics were still working hard to revive me. They were almost ready to give up. I noticed when they exchanged glances, and one of them asked the other how many rounds of CPR they had already performed. The other replied that they thought they had exhausted all attempts. Realizing they were about to give up, I prepared to return to my body. Before doing so, I made sure to carefully observe the faces of the professionals who were taking care of me. I wanted to remember each one. As I regained my vital functions, I floated above my body. The last detail I remember before feeling a wave of heat was hearing one of the ambulance technicians say that they had found a pulse. At that moment, I knew I had returned and that I was alive. It took 47 minutes of resuscitation attempts before they managed to detect my pulse, just as they were about to give up. After that, I woke up from a coma days later and clearly saw the beings I spoke with. The place I was in resembled a desert filled with an oasis of water, trees, and stones. It was night, making it hard to see. This experience was marked by a disruption in the flow of time, but that was where I saw myself and stayed. I talked to an old dog I had cared for, a German shepherd named Voltron. He was there, and I apologized to him because, in the last years of his life, I couldn't keep him by my side, and I felt I had failed to provide the care he deserved. Even though he stayed with my parents, I felt as if I had abandoned him, despite him being with family. I understand some might think it's strange to care so much for an animal, but they too have souls, thoughts, and feelings. That's why I apologized to him. I met a young man who looked familiar, but I didn't recognize him at first. He introduced himself as Peter. Peter was actually the son of my sister, who was born a twin and passed away about 5 hours after birth. His sister survived and is still alive on Earth. Peter asked me to send a message to his mother and his twin sister, which I did. Later, I met another person who identified himself as Jonathan. Jonathan had drowned when he was just 2.5 years old, a devastating moment for our family, especially for my sister. He asked me to tell his mother that he was okay and happy, and that she could be at peace, and since then, she has found that peace. I conveyed that message too, but I'm not sure where in the flow of time I drifted away from the people I was speaking with. It felt like in the sky, there was no real limit to the kinds of thoughts we can have when we're on Earth in our bodies. It's as if there is a shell surrounding our brain that contains our thoughts. In the sky, that barrier doesn't exist, allowing for a connection and a multidimensional experience. Even today, 15 years after that event, I still haven't completely understood all of this. I keep trying to piece things together and reflect on what happened and the messages I received, especially regarding the various emerging conflicts on Earth, something that was highlighted during my celestial experience. I know that a counsel I was given contains some related insights, but I can't remember everything clearly. Perhaps it was never fully unveiled to me, but it's certainly not clear in my mind. I also encountered an aunt who passed away at 54. She was quite strict with me throughout my life, showing cruelty not only toward me, but also towards my children. To my surprise, she apologized. That was truly emotional and meaningful, as she finally acknowledged her behavior and expressed regret. I found my grandfather, with whom I spent a lot of time, as well as my grandmother. In my childhood, I spent considerable time with my grandparents since my family was large and I was particularly cherished. My parents never accepted the idea of letting me be adopted by them, but I always stayed with my grandparents during school holidays and whenever I had health issues. So, I also encountered them in heaven. However, I would hesitate to call that place magical, as I don't want to encourage people to rush there before the right time. But it was undoubtedly a place where I felt I could find comfort, answers, and beings who understood me. I remember various details vaguely. For instance, I recall walking and noticing that the ground felt solid, although I rarely looked down to see exactly what the consistency of the ground I was walking on was. except when I was in the part of the desert. That experience has always stood out to me, since I have never been to a true desert like those outside Australia, where our deserts are filled with bushes and red dirt. There, it was a desert of fine white sand, something I have never experienced in this life. I have always found that curious. My understanding is that we transition to another life, but that does not happen immediately upon arriving in heaven. Heaven is a place where we go to heal and restore ourselves. Surely, you have had moments in your life when you felt deeply sad, betrayed, or hurt, and all those experiences are lessons. When you accumulate, say, 70, 80, or even 90 of these lessons, they can weigh you down and generate frustration in your work. I've realized that the traumas that afflict us or make us feel sad or irritable have the potential to cause disease and disharmony in our bodies. While examining the lives of individuals who faced lung cancer, for instance, I noticed many similarities among them, as well as between those suffering from breast or stomach diseases. Throughout this transcendental journey, a profound truth revealed itself to me. The human body is, in fact, a temporary vessel, an ephemeral garment that houses something far more enduring and profound, our true essence, the soul. This understanding came as an epiphany, where I realized that our soul flows constantly, not confined to a single time or space. It follows a path that transcends the limitations of life and death, migrating from one existence to another, always assuming a new physical body that best suits the lessons it needs to learn and the challenges it must face. In one of these revelations, I understood that the choice of a new family and a new life context does not occur randomly, but rather as a result of the soul's infinite wisdom, which carefully chooses an environment that will provide the necessary conditions for its growth and evolution. Whether within a rich and privileged family, where material abundance teaches about generosity and responsibility, or in a scenario of extreme poverty, like in vulnerable regions of Africa, where the daily struggle for survival offers lessons on resilience, community, and the appreciation of life in its simplest forms. Each body we inhabit is specifically chosen to align with the experiences we need to undergo. This form becomes a repository of all those experiences, holding each joy, pain, achievement, and failure, akin to a blank canvas slowly filled with the colors and shapes of our lives. The physical body reflects the nuances of the soul's journey. I visualize the vastness of an African landscape with its broad savannas and a wide, starry sky. Imagine a child born in this environment, facing demanding challenges each day, but also experiencing moments of genuine joy, like the simplicity of a shared smile, the gratitude for a meal, and the solidarity in times of need. These experiences, despite the challenges, are incredibly rich in lessons about the essence of being human. In contrast, I envision a scene of splendor, perhaps in a vibrant city like New York or Dubai, where skyscrapers line the horizon and technology permeates every aspect of life. In this environment, a child can understand the complexity of human relationships in a world where the material often overshadows the spiritual, facing the challenge of discovering meaning and purpose beyond the mere accumulation of possessions. At both ends of the spectrum, the soul finds fertile ground to nurture the virtues essential to its journey. Through life's difficulties, we learn to appreciate our interconnectedness with others and recognize that we are all part of a much broader and intricate tapestry. These reflections lead me to contemplate the cyclical nature of existence, just as the seasons follow an eternal cycle of birth, growth, decline, and renewal. The journey of the soul is also a continuous path of rebirth. Each new life represents a spring, a chance for renewal and growth, allowing us to experience life from new perspectives, facing challenges that shape and strengthen our spirit. This understanding has transformed my view of death and rebirth. Death is not an end, but a transition, a gateway that leads us to a new life experience where our essence continues its evolutionary journey. In this context, every earthly existence, every body we inhabit, is a blessing, a gift that allows us to explore, learn, and evolve. With this awareness, I see life not merely as a series of random events, but as a rich and diverse journey, where each lesson is meticulously orchestrated to contribute to our continuous growth. As we spend so much time in this body, when we initially arrive in the heavens, we still carry the memory of this body with us. We do not immediately return to our energetic form, but we continue to resemble ourselves and experience different life processes that are incredibly simple, yet also extremely complex. For example, with my two nephews, it is fascinating that they remained in heaven and continued to evolve until reaching adulthood. You might think they would have moved on with their lives quickly, but as it turns out, the boy who was a twin had a destiny to fulfill alongside his brother. If he were to enter another body, he would somehow stray from his purpose. Therefore, he would need to return to Earth after his brother's death to continue this twin journey, being by his side once more. As for my other sister's son, it was clear that he had a path to follow with her, which is truly fascinating. In the end, as I mentioned, I faced a choice between staying or returning to heaven. When I decided to go back, it seemed I convinced them to send me back. I was in a medication-induced coma in the hospital, and during a visit from my husband, I momentarily came out of that state to tell him that I had returned because of him before slipping back into the coma. It was an extraordinary experience. Now, 15 years later, it seems that in heaven they were quite determined that I should return and continue my mission, but it was a choice that had to be mine. They guided me in such a way as to ensure I was on the right path. What did you think about this incredible story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on every new video. Thank you for watching until the end. If you want to see more accounts like this, click on the video that YouTube is suggesting on your screen.